Time is running out. A consensus is forming that next week represents the last chance for MPs to act to stop a no-deal Brexit. Boris Johnson has piled vast pressure on MPs with his prorogation of Parliament from as early as Monday the 9th of September, drastically curtailing the time available for them to prevent the UK automatically leaving the European Union on the 31st of October.
Hi, good morning, hello, good morning, good morning, good morning.
The Prime Minister's comments today, after a press conference with school children, suggests he's well aware of the importance of the next 7 days.
The weird thing is that the more the parliamentarians try to block the no-deal Brexit, the more likely it is that we'll end up in that situation.
So how could the coming week play out? Rebel Tories and opposition MPs have essentially two options. One, change the law to remove the 31st of October cliff edge. Two, attempt to bring down the government through a vote of no confidence. Both options have serious potential obstacles to success, and both could face countermeasures from Downing Street. First, change the law. MPs are likely to apply for an emergency debate on Tuesday under Standing Order 24 to take control of Commons business. This could allow them to alter legislation to compel the Prime Minister to ask for an Article 50 extension or amend the Withdrawal Act to make a no-deal exit unlawful. But there are risks.
The biggest obstacles for them are obviously winning votes, and not just one vote but a series of votes. First of all, they've got to get approval for this change to the order paper. They've then got to get through a business motion that decides how they'll go about bringing in this bill. It involves this alliance to stick together through it and to have a complete agreement about what is the best way forward. In terms of the Commons, they need to get this passed on either Wednesday or Thursday for it to then go off to the Lords. The Lords can sit for longer, but also peers, their Conservative peers, will have more opportunities to try and delay, so it could take a lot longer. Once Parliament is prorogued, that bill falls, and if it's not completed by then, they'd have to come back in October with an even shorter time frame and try and do the whole thing again from scratch.
Second, vote of no confidence. If MPs can't change the law to prevent no deal, they could attempt to change the government. But there are big risks for this route too, particularly if MPs can't agree on a temporary caretaker administration to take over. A successful vote of no confidence in the absence of this could leave power in Boris Johnson's hands to force a no deal by default.
It is theoretically possible if he does not leave, an alternative government is not there, and he remains as Prime Minister, he sets the date for the election. There's a good chance that if that doesn't happen this week, then because the government control when an election is set, that it might not be set before the 31st of October.
Yet could we see Parliament extend the time available to itself to combat a no deal?
They have an opportunity to legislate. There could be lots of things that are put in it, one of which might be changing their sitting hours, so they're sitting on Fridays, they're sitting over the weekend. The other of them might be changes to prorogation. That could be as much as trying to change the whole terms of prorogation, possibly even trying to get the prorogation completely removed. That might be a step too far. More likely is that they'll try and find some way to force the government to come back sooner.
So MPs could, theoretically, create more time for themselves next week. But if they're going to carve out this leeway, they still need to act fast and with unprecedented unity over the next 7 days.
Ben Chew there. So with less parliamentary time to marshal their forces, how will opponents of the Prime Minister's Brexit approach move into action next week? Hilary Benn, the Labour MP who chairs the Commons Brexit Committee, joins us now from Leeds. Welcome.
Good evening.
Good evening. Look, you would accept that for the opposition, it's Tuesday or never, isn't it now? This is the last chance.
It is now or never, and for every single member of Parliament in the House of Commons, if they think that a no-deal Brexit would be bad for the country, is not in the national interest, would damage the economy and will lead to the sort of consequences we saw revealed in the Operation Yellowhammer report that was leaked a couple of weeks ago, this is the moment for MPs to act to prevent it from happening. And I have to say, it was an extraordinary cheek of the Prime Minister today to suggest that we might somehow be to blame for a no-deal Brexit when he is the person who's been threatening the country with it, and we are the people who are trying to stop it.
Given the fact that you're not going to tell us exactly how, that you've got tactics or approaches, but given how limited the time is, are you satisfied there is actually a workable plan in place?
Yes, I think there is, and don't forget, Mark, that we showed that we were able to pass legislation in the House of Commons in a day earlier this year with Yvette Cooper's bill. So the House of Commons has done this before, and it can do so again, but it requires sufficient number of MPs to vote for it, and this is the moment.
You were able to take control of business at a couple of points, and then we had indicative votes, and you didn't know what you wanted as a House. You couldn't agree. So what's to stop this being any different?
Well, I think the thing to understand about the group of MPs who are resolutely opposed to no deal is in that group there are very different views about what should happen. Some would cheerfully voted for Mrs May's deal. Some would vote for a deal if it came back, if Boris Johnson is able to get one. But I'm not entirely sure, Mark, that there are any serious negotiations taking place. The Prime Minister says there are readily available alternative arrangements for the Irish border. Well, Theresa May spent over 2 years looking for them without any success. And there's others like me who say the only way to resolve this is not, on the one hand, to have a no-deal Brexit, or on the other hand, to scrap the whole thing by revoking Article 50, but to go back to the people and say, in a confirmatory referendum, this is the deal that's been negotiated, that's what leaving looks like, or you can vote to remain.
Well,
but what unites
there isn't a majority for a second referendum, is there?
No, not at the moment. There is not. I accept that. But what
I
does
just wonder
unite
what you
us
think you're going
is
to
our
achieve
opposition
by,
to no
after
deal.
3 years without actually coming to a view of a route to Brexit that Parliament can agree on. What you're going to achieve by blocking no deal and extending this even further?
Well, you stop the Prime Minister from pushing the country over the edge of an economic cliff. You stop the kind of disruption which ministers know would ensue on the short crossing, food price rises, potential shortages of some foods, and great uncertainty for many businesses, and damage to that open border in Northern Ireland. This is not some kind of game. This is about the future of the country, and there is no mandate, Mark, from the referendum for a no-deal Brexit. There is no mandate. And I think the responsibility on every member of Parliament who is opposed to a no-deal is to support the action that we now know we need to take to stop the Prime Minister from doing this to the country.
If you're right about the absence of seriousness about the Prime Minister's negotiation with the EU, and there are difficulties standing in his way, and it's getting closer and closer to no deal, would you vote for what was essentially a modified version of the existing withdrawal agreement?
Well, the trouble with what the Prime Minister is arguing for is it's even worse than Theresa May's deal, because he wants a Canada-style free trade agreement. Now, we all know that a Canada-style free trade agreement would not keep the border open in Northern Ireland.
Well, that's for arguing about in the future, isn't it?
Well, no,
the withdrawal agreement, well, it's non-binding. It's part of the political declaration.
Yeah,
so
but that is where the Prime Minister has said. That is where the Prime Minister said he wants to take the country. Now, if you believe that it's absolutely vital in the interests of maintaining the Good Friday Agreement and the peace and progress we have seen in Northern Ireland, and this is really, really serious, to say I want a Canada-style deal when that will inevitably mean checks on the border, no, it's not something that I would be prepared to vote for.
I'm just, okay, but then you will have to take some of the responsibility for no deal. Because Boris Johnson, in the last meaningful vote, he was prepared to vote for the withdrawal agreement to prevent a no-deal Brexit. At the point at which the withdrawal agreement is agreed, you can have a transition period, you can resume the political argument about the future direction.
Well, I'm not going to accept being blamed by Boris Johnson about no deal, because he is the one who is threatening it. He has made it the policy of the government. He says, if I cannot get the kind of deal I want from the European Union, we're leaving without one. That is what the Prime Minister wants to do. Now, he doesn't have to do that. He could pursue a different approach. But since he's insistent on saying that he is prepared to take us out with no deal, with all of the consequences, the government knows what it will mean. The government's own economic assessment shows it's the most damaging economic outcome, and they're preparing to support companies that will be badly affected. He doesn't have to do this, and Parliament doesn't have to approve it, and next week is the chance to prevent it from happening. And that's your right. Politics will then have to find a way of resolving this, and I believe, and I would cheerfully vote for, going back to the people and saying, you make the final decision.
Hilary Benn, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So, with a former Conservative Prime Minister, John Major, now joining the legal action against the prorogation of Parliament, how capable will the party be at defending its own Brexit policy? We'd love to have had a member of the government on to discuss this, but once again, tonight, they declined our invitation. But we are joined from Derbyshire by Pauline Latham, a Conservative MP and member of the Eurosceptic European Research Group. Welcome and thank you for joining us this evening. You've got stories in the papers tonight about clashes between Sajid Javid and the Prime Minister over the sacking of a special advisor. You've got John Major joining in with this legal challenge. And you've got a number of people, David Gauke, Philip Hammond, those sorts of people, former senior figures, hinting that they could oppose the government. How united is the Conservative Party looking behind the Prime Minister at the moment?
Well, I think the majority of the members are behind the Prime Minister. If we put Sajid and the argument about the employee on one side and just look at the rest of the people that you've mentioned, they're all people who don't want us to leave at all, as indeed is Hilary Benn. He doesn't want us to leave the European Union. He'd like to stay. And they're the people who are jumping up and down and making all the fuss. We have to get on with this. We have to remember that Brussels is fed up with the whole thing as well. And there's no way that we know that they would extend Article 50. Not that I want to. I think we should get on and do the deal. If there is you can't do a deal if there is no threat that you will leave without the deal. So I think Boris Johnson has a better chance than we've ever had to get a deal. And we're talking about it being no deal. We don't know that that's what we're going to be discussing. We have no idea, but I hope Boris is going to come back. He wants a deal. Most of us would like a deal. But if it comes to it and we have to leave without a deal, we need to do it on the 31st of October. Business needs certainty. They've not had certainty for 3 years, and they need it now.
But just before we move off this issue of the dismissal of the special advisor to Sajid Javid, do you think Dominic Cummings, the Prime Minister's advisor, is too powerful? He's apparently tried to impose discipline on all the other special advisors. Are there dangers in that approach? Is it a repeat of what Theresa May did early on in her Prime Ministership?
Well, there were an awful lot of leaks from her during her time. Yes, but she surrounded herself with certain types of people, and what we need to do is have the right people for the right job. And if this woman is not the right person, and maybe she did leak, I don't know, if she did, then it's no good having people who are prepared to go behind their ministers' backs and leaking to everybody out there. We can't do that. We've got to have discipline. It's important. We've not had discipline in the Conservative Party for 3 years, not real discipline. And I think it's time we got back to that.
Yeah, I mean, clearly she's not here to defend herself against the accusation of leaking.
No.
But let's talk about what a deal might...
And I don't know. I don't know the truth. Okay.
Fair enough, thank you. Let's talk about what a deal might look like, the sort of deal that could get your vote. Is it a polish? Is it a tweaked version of the deal you did actually vote for on the third meaningful vote?
Yeah, I voted for it because I just wanted to get out of Europe, but unfortunately it wasn't going to get us out of Europe. So I probably shouldn't have voted at that point, but I didn't vote for the twice before. There's not enough people will vote for that deal. Even if Boris Johnson came back with exactly the same deal, it would not go through. There wouldn't be the will in Parliament to get it through. So we've got to look at something different. And the absolute minimum is getting rid of the Irish backstop, and there would be ways of doing it. I understand there's a report being drawn up of all the companies who think they have the solution, and it's being drawn up to be looked at fairly soon so that we can choose a system and persuade Europe to back the system so that people can move freely across the borders but still be checked, not necessarily on the border, away from the border, and there's technology out there that can do it.
You, I know,
I'd also like to see £39 billion
Yeah.
off the table, but not all of it will be taken off the table, I know.
Briefly, of course, you would like to see a deal, and you believe the EU has to believe in the possibility of no deal to empower that. Well, whether or not they do, isn't it the case that an awful lot more MPs now believe in the possibility of no deal, and that could change the dynamic for a re-engineered version of the withdrawal agreement? Increase the chances of it passing?
Oh, I think we'll find that out very soon. Well, I think the trouble is, if we don't get an agreement, it will be no deal, and we can't stretch out the time. We can't go and say we're leaving on the 31st of October and then say, oh, actually, it's going to be the end of November. Oh no, let's do it in January. We can't do that. We can't do it for business. They need to know what they're doing,
Pauline Latham.
And I think they need to know it as soon as possible.
Well, next week, I'm sure they'll get a much better idea. Thank you very much indeed for joining us.